I guess the start of season 3 picks up where season 2 leaves off. Shaun has asked Carly out on a date and she said yes, and so we will get to see Shaun go on that first date. And I guess that sets us up for the season in terms of looking thematically at love and how Shaun is experiencing it and where that journey will take him. Things between them will go step by step and will be teased out little bit by little bit. I love that David Shaw, does that so brilliantly in his writing, is just kind of teasing out these little moments and allowing us to explore the nuances of a relationship instead of feeling like we need to rush through, a first date to get to a kiss or to get to whatever it leads to. And so it certainly goes step by step, but allows us, I think, as an audience to really look at these tiny little wins that we all can relate to, but oftentimes don't get to see in other shows. So aside from Shaun's quest to find love, which I think is a quest we all are on in our individual lives as well, the exciting thing about season 3 is that the residents are getting their first opportunity to have their first surgery. And so we will see each of them, in whatever order the story ends up taking us in, going on those, first surgery journeys and seeing where it takes them. So I think from Shaun's perspective, it's obviously something that he has long looked forward to and sort of seen as this culminating moment for him in his career, but it may not go entirely according to plan. I think there's a stereotype of someone who has autism that they somehow can't grow or learn or change. And yes, Shaun will, of course, always have autism, but that doesn't mean that he can't constantly, learn and grow up and get older as we all do, and therefore change because of that and because of these obstacles that are put in his way and the people that he meets. I think as he's become more comfortable in the hospital, it's been really nice to get a greater sense of his, what he finds funny, the people that he may fall in love with and why. Those little human sides to him that he was perhaps a little bit more guarded about or incapable of expressing at the beginning, we now get greater insight into. I guess people do like Shaun and are drawn to him, hopefully. I think I've always thought since the very beginning the hopeful outlook on the world and the optimistic way that he views humanity and believing that people are inherently good people is a message that people have connected to and that have connected to Shaun through that.
If we're speaking generally in season 3, one of the shifts is that we just focus more personally on every character. We either go home with them, or new relationships are formed, or we further examine current relationships. We just, and even while still upholding the procedural structure and in these great medical cases, we do get more personal.
Give me a little spotlight on your personal relationships this year.
Yeah.
For me personally, there's a lot of lessons coming, some hard ones. I think we haven't seen Melinda's challenge to the point that we're going to see during this 3rd season, and not always meeting that challenge. And which I think is a new feeling for Melinda's, and so there's a certain caution that comes with that, which can almost be detrimental to the level that he works at. So. Navigating that is going to be a big thing, and as well as we find in the beginning of the season that with her promotion just really changes things a lot. This was a confidant, someone that we worked on cases together, and now there's a certain, in some ways, a divide.
So far, it's been that, she's had to navigate what that means for her. How much of herself does she compromise, and what is she willing to sacrifice, personally or professionally? Which one? I think she's currently, well, I don't know about currently, but she's trying to balance it perfectly, and I think she's struggling.
Melendez has grown in that he's been a lot more open to outside help. Obviously with the entrance of Dr. Shaun Murphy and his different ideas, I've always kind of seen him and Melendez and not opposites, but mirrors of each other. I think there's things they both really envy in the other. As Shaun says in the beginning, you're a lot smarter than doctors I trained with, and I know I have a lot to learn from you. Mm-hmm. And of course, we're all seeing the same thing, that Melendez has a lot to learn from him. And I think there's an envy in the abilities that he has that Melendez doesn't. But when you put those together and his willingness now to really, be more open to Shaun, but as well still holding fast to training him like everyone else and treating him like every other resident who's an unknown until they're not, and making sure they're ready.
Well, a big defining moment for Lim would be when she almost died in season 2. I think that sort of broke her open a little bit because, as soon as she's, I don't know how many days into recovery she is, and she's like, all right, listen, I have feelings for you. I'm just going to tell you. So I would say that the evolution there for her would be, prior to that, she was only career driven. It's revealed that she's divorced. And I think she was just kind of like, well, I'm just going to have some one night stands and go on dates maybe, but really just singularly focus on work. And then as soon as that happened to her, I think she was like, oh, you know what? It's time to do some of the things that I didn't make time for. And so her evolution might be, her maturation process is to be a little more vulnerable. Some of the banter they have, the ease they have, the fun they have with one another, they ribbed each other all through season 2.
I think also that these two characters have been created that are just such strong personalities, and to find them soften and meld into each other is kind of it's refreshing to see. We see a very different side of these two that couldn't happen in any other way, I don't think.
They're really good. They've written them as very good. What's the word I'm looking for? They argue well.
Yeah, sparring partners.
Yeah, they're good sparring partners. Yeah, I was like, what's the word I'm looking for? Combat, no. Yeah, sparring partners. They're great sparring partners. And I think that that's something that Lim respects quite a bit about Melendez.
So here we are at the beginning of season 3 of The Good Doctor. At the end of season 2, my character, Dr. Andrews, made a very big decision. And that was to put his own career on the line to save the job of our very own good doctor, Dr. Shaun Murphy. And at the very beginning of this season, we see the consequences of that decision. So we see that he ostensibly has lost his job because he decided that. The premise that's been developed for season 3 for Dr. Andrews on our show is really interesting because the first 2 seasons, he was in a position of leadership. He was the chief of surgery the first season, attempting to become president. The second season, he becomes president and is also the chief of surgery. And then now the third season, he has been completely demoted back to where he was before we even met him in the first season. So I think that's really interesting. It's really interesting to explore how that changes a character's personality and approach. Also, how that character interacts differently with the other people, particularly having a new boss that used to work for him. When I look at the way our show is written, David Shore does such a wonderful job making each character really specific that I get excited to read the next script. And whenever it gets published, I think all the actors, we go right in and we read as soon as it comes out, even if we're in the midst of shooting another episode, because we all really love the writing and we all really love the show. And you're able to weave a journey or an arc for a character because the givens exist. And I think the reason why people love The Good Doctor so much is that a hospital is just a microcosm of society. People come up to me in airports or wherever and talk about, hey, I have a cousin who deals with autism, or I have a son or a daughter or a brother or a sister who's dealing with it, or I'm dealing with being on the spectrum. And this allows me to articulate some of the things that I'm feeling. And obviously, Dr. Shaun Murphy isn't attempting in any way to be every person who's dealing with autism in any way. However, the folks that have talked to me say, hey, some little glimpse of the way he articulated that's the way I feel sometimes. So I actually showed that clip, or I showed that scene to somebody, and they understood me better. And I think that's a beautiful thing. What I've really enjoyed about playing Dr. Andrews is that David Shore and the writing team have really created a wonderful arc and a journey for a character that was all about aspiration, with a lot of ego, achieve it, but then what does that even mean? And then lose it all or sacrifice it all. So really sublimate the ego. So the act that he took at the end of last season, it's going into this season, is his ego was completely sublimated by choice. And I think that resonates with people because people like to see a journey.
Season 2 and season 3 basically blend right into each other. One picks up right after the other. So Morgan is, on her journey of continuing to be the best doctor she can be, but also in her relationships with other actors, just learning from them and growing and affecting them, and just same old Morgan, really. When Morgan first came on the scene, she was definitely a bit of a troublemaker, stirring stuff up. Her competitiveness and her unapologetic intelligence was something that definitely rubbed people the wrong way. And over time, we've gotten to see Morgan. She's more of a complete person. We've seen her be emotional. We've seen her deal with loss. We've seen her fun side, and that's just gonna continue to happen more and more. What people tend to respond to with Morgan is, and this is what I hear from fans on, social media, Instagram and whatnot, they talk about how they love how confident she is and unapologetic she is. And that's something that I think people initially hated, but now people have really grown to love and appreciate. They see it's not from this place of anger or trying to hurt somebody, but it's really just, speaking her mind and, embracing her strengths, which is something that I've actually started to do myself. It's really cool how your character can actually kind of affect you in your own life, and I really enjoy it. Contrary to what everyone thinks, Morgan actually does like Shaun and does care for him and want him to do well. And I think Morgan approaches most things like a scientist, and I think she's fascinated with Shaun going on this date and his relationship. But when he does need help, she will begrudgingly help him. Vancouver is like my first home. I love Vancouver so much. Canadians are crazy cool, and it's one of the most beautiful places in the world. So I really love living here.
Alex Park's character at the end of season 2 kind of found himself in the middle of juggling family life and work life. And, the things that broke down his marriage become evident in the end of season 2 and how he has trouble balancing those things. So we end up in season 3 and, we're not sure, we haven't really started exploring that side of it yet. And little pieces have been sprinkled in through the scripts, but season 3, we open up with Alex, trying to be the best doctor he can be and, having a competitive spirit with Morgan Resnick and developing this really cool relationship between him and Shaun. So my characters, from the time I was introduced at the end of season 1 to now, I think first he was just because he was a former cop, making a big shift in his career at a later age, having gone through a divorce. I think you've seen a more colder version of someone who's kind of desensitized to just in general to not humanity, but it's just more matter of fact and more clinical with how he approaches things. And I think as the season has gone through in the second season, these cases affect him, and balancing life and work affect him. And now in season 3, he's starting to feel his place in the hospital and have some fun here. What I anticipate for my character in season 3 is I think there's going to be more banter and more this competitive spirit between me and Morgan Resnick, and kind of this friendship between Shaun and Alex Park, which is just an interesting juxtaposition of two characters who couldn't be from two different worlds, and that they find some sort of buddy comfort in each other. Two people who don't share a lot, but slowly in their own way share with each other. Me more than him. And I'm not sure with my family yet. David Shore has kind of left that a mystery. Season 3, being back in Vancouver, it is starting now until probably September is my favorite place in the world at this time, because it's beautiful, and Vancouver has figured out how to do everything just outdoors wise. It's just amazing for kids, for families. So we're all excited. And I mean, you walk outside today and it's beautiful.
So we last see Leah walking into her and Shaun's apartment, and he's standing there with flowers and a certain look on his face. And Leah had thought maybe he's trying to, come at this from another angle, asking her out, possibly on a date, and he ends up not doing that. And so we kind of leave with her processing that. We originally kind of see her struggle with her identity and where she feels like she fits in the work environment and her personal life. And throughout all of those changes in her life, the one constant is her friendship with Shaun. And because of his honesty and his loyalty to being an honest human, that's a solid rock for all these transitions Leah has gone through. So I think with that, we're going to explore her finding herself even more. And I think having someone like Shaun in her life who is so comfortable in his own skin is a really good person to have. Relationships in general are, I think, the most universal thing to discuss in everyday life. It's the most confusing thing. It's the most thing we kind of all yearn for and are just curious about. So I think with Leah, she's been very open in her own way about her curiosity with relationships and her failures with relationships, her transitions with her family and the men in her life, and then also having someone like Shaun and what that represents in her life. I find that it's such a good outlet for people to it's a good palette for people to kind of place their thoughts and maybe kind of think about their own relationships in their life. I think it's just such a challenge for, again, just kind of holding to your own statements and boundaries you put in place and not going back on them. And she put those boundaries up, and now they're being executed and received from Shaun. And I think, again, that's a very relatable thing when maybe that makes you double think certain boundaries you put in place to begin with. And I think, we're going to explore a little bit of that.
The presence of Carly in the show is to show how he's learning how to be open and be intimate and explore feelings that he hasn't learned about necessarily. He's a really brilliant doctor. Obviously, he's super textbook smart. He's able to understand science in a way that a lot of people can't. And that is something that, he's been able to dedicate and commit himself to. But you can't learn love, you can't learn romance, you can't learn the dance of intimacy with someone else without having to do the steps. And so that is her role in the show, I think, to show the audience how he's continuing to grow.
She doesn't want to change anything about him. She just wants to figure out how they can work together because she likes him a lot. And, that can be a tricky thing in any kind of relationship, no matter who it's with, is trying to figure out how you work well together and what challenges you have and how you can work with them. Hopefully not a lot of people are walking around trying to figure out how to change everybody that they're into. But I think that the audiences will really respect that Carly is approaching this relationship with new eyes and not expecting him to do what, people that she has dated in the past before have done. She wants to really take him as he is and hopes that he will take her as she is too. I'm hoping that resonates with audiences because it's one of the things that I really like about her. We laugh a lot. So granted, most of my scenes are with Shaun and Shaun's character with Freddie, and poor Freddie has to listen to me sing pretty much in every single scene that we're in. At some point, I'm either going to be dancing or singing somewhere. It's how I get through time. And so far, nobody's told me to shut up. Nobody's pushed me out of the way and said, please, this is not a musical. But we're only at the start of season 3, so there's time. I'm sure I'll get on somebody's nerves at some point.